One train, one target, one mistake. They thought she was weak. They thought she was alone. They were wrong, because sitting beside her is a man who has survived the worst places on Earth and a dog trained to kill before danger strikes. In the dark tunnels beneath the city, where no one can hear you scream, survival belongs to those who strike first and never miss.
Have you ever felt so much pain that you were completely invisible? That is how Chloe felt when the train lurched, sending fire up her legs and forcing her into an empty seat. A man with a scarred face sat there, a huge German shepherd by his side. This dog was different. It stared right at her with intense golden eyes, as if it was the only one in the world who truly saw her. What did this dog know that no one else did? This trip was a disaster for Chloe Rollins. At just 24 years old, her life was a painful cycle of spinal surgeries. Heavy titanium crutches and leg braces were the only things that kept her standing. Every step was a battle, and today, the pain had won. The station smelled of stale food, exhaust fumes, and the nervous sweat of thousands of strangers. She just wanted to get on the 5:15 p.m. train to Boston and go home. When they called for boarding, a wave of people pushed Chloe aside without a second thought. They were not trying to be mean, they just did not see her. In a crowded city, a struggling girl is easy to ignore. A man in a nice suit bumped her hard, sending a shock of pain up her spine. When she finally got on the train, every seat was taken. People used their bags to block the aisle seats, hiding behind their phones so they would not have to look at her. Chloe struggled down the aisle, her crutches making a loud clicking sound in the car. She could feel the other passengers getting annoyed. Her arms were shaking and her legs felt like they would collapse. Then, at the very end of the car, she saw it. A single, open aisle seat. As she drew closer, she understood why it was empty. The man by the window sat perfectly still, wearing a dark coat and a black hat that shadowed his eyes. A pale pink scar traced a line from his ear down to his collar. His eyes were closed, but his body was tense, like a tightly coiled wire. Yet he was not the reason the seat was free. A 90-pound German shepherd sat on the floor beside him. This was not a normal dog. It had a special harness with a patch that said, "Do not pet." He looked less like a Carpathian and more like a four-legged soldier. Chloe hesitated. The train's horn blared, announcing its departure. Her weak legs started to tremble. She had to sit down immediately. Leaning on her crutches, she moved forward. "Excuse me?" she asked, her voice quiet and unsteady. The man's eyes opened in a flash. They were a piercing, cold gray. He looked her over, seeing her exhaustion, her tight grip, and the metal braces on her legs. He remained silent. "Is this seat available?" Chloe asked softly. The man observed her for another moment before giving a single, sharp nod. He did not say a word. He motioned to his dog with a small hand gesture. The huge shepherd immediately shifted, pressing himself against the man's legs to clear a path for Chloe. "Thank you," she said with relief, collapsing into the seat. She rested her crutches against the wall and shut her eyes as the train began to roll. She breathed deeply, trying to will the pain in her back to fade. The man beside her was completely still. His name was Jackson Reynolds, but his history went far beyond veteran. He was a retired operator from the elite SEAL Team 6. For the last 14 years, Jackson had worked in the most dangerous places on Earth. He had survived firefights in mountains and rescued people from dense jungles. His dog, Havoc, was not a pet. Havoc was a military working dog with incredible training. He could detect explosives, track targets, and neutralize enemies on command. He had jumped from planes with Jackson and had saved his partner's life more times than he could remember. Havoc was conditioned to ignore everything that was not a direct threat. He did not react to noises, smells, or other people. That is why his next move sent a shock of alarm through Jackson. The train sped up, emerging from a dark tunnel into the bright sun. Chloe moved in her seat, and a sharp cramp caused her leg brace to make a loud clank. She gasped, biting her lip to hide the pain. She hated appearing weak. On the floor, Havoc's ears perked up. Jackson watched him closely. Havoc's training was absolute. He was ordered to stay down. That rule was programmed into his mind. But for the very first time, Havoc disobeyed a direct order. The massive German Shepherd rose to his feet. Jackson tensed, his hand instinctively moving to the hidden Sig Sauer P365 pistol he carried. Havoc would only break a command for a matter of life and death. But the dog was not searching for a weapon. His entire focus was on Chloe. She froze as the 90-pound animal moved toward her. His powerful jaws could break a bone. She held her breath, paralyzed with fear. Jackson started to give a command, but the words died in his throat. Havoc was not snarling or baring his teeth. He did something Jackson had never witnessed in 6 years. The dog gently rested his heavy head on Chloe's trembling, braced leg. Chloe let out a tiny, surprised breath. Havoc let out a long, low sigh. He looked up at her with his powerful eyes. Then he sat up straight beside her, like a personal bodyguard. The dog had become a living barrier, protecting this vulnerable woman. Jackson realized with a jolt that his dog was now her guardian. "Oh, I am so sorry," Chloe whispered. Her hand hovered over the dog's head, uncertain if she should touch him. "Is he all right?" Jackson finally turned to really look at her. He saw the deep weariness in her face and the slight tremor in her hands. He saw Havoc scanning the train car. "He is fine," Jackson replied. His voice was low and gravelly, shaped by years of shouting over helicopter noise. "He's just never done that before." "Done what?" Chloe asked softly, finally daring to stroke Havoc's thick coat. The dog leaned into her touch, and Jackson's jaw dropped. "He is a military canine," Jackson explained quietly. "He is trained to find bombs, not to give comfort. He does not seek out people." Chloe could only stare at the giant dog now resting on her leg. Why was this highly trained animal acting this way? Jackson frowned as his eyes swept over the other riders. Years of instinct kicked in. Havoc was not just being friendly. Dogs like him can smell chemical shifts in the human body. They can sense fear and evil intentions. The dog knew Chloe was vulnerable, but he had also positioned himself to watch the aisle. Jackson's gaze moved across the passengers. An older couple slept in row 12. A student wearing headphones was on a laptop in row 13. In row 14, a mother entertained her child with a tablet. Then his eyes fell on row 15 and on a man in a polished blue suit. Jackson's focus sharpened. The man's name was Simon Miller, though Jackson did not know it. Simon appeared to be a normal professional, with styled hair and expensive glasses. Anyone else would just see a businessman. But Jackson saw the details that were wrong. Simon was in an aisle seat but was turned at a strange angle. He held a magazine but had not turned a page in over 10 minutes. The real clue was how he used the dark window like a mirror. He was not looking outside. He was watching the reflection of the car. He was watching the back of the train. He was watching Chloe. Jackson saw Simon's gaze track her reflection. The man's jaw was clenched. He briefly reached a hand into his jacket, then pulled it out. It might have been a nervous tick, or he might have been checking a weapon. And then Havoc growled, a low rumble that Jackson felt in his bones. Jackson knew that sound. It was the sound Havoc made just before they entered a dangerous place. "What is it?" Chloe whispered, her hand pulling away as the dog's muscles tensed. "It is nothing," Jackson said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "He is working. Keep your hands on your lap, please, and do not make any sudden moves." The atmosphere in the car changed from boring to charged. A heavy tension filled the space around them. Jackson Reynolds sat perfectly still, appearing calm but ready to act in an instant. A chill ran down Chloe's spine, but she did not know why she was suddenly so afraid. It was not because of the scarred man next to her. He was the only person who had been kind to her. His dog was intimidating, but his solid presence against her leg felt safe. Still, she could feel danger in the air. "What is your name?" Jackson asked softly, his eyes locked on the man in the suit. "Chloe," she replied, her voice shaky. "My name is Chloe Rollins." "I am Jackson," he said. "All right, Chloe. Listen, I do not want to scare you, but did you see anyone watching you before? Maybe at the station?" Chloe's heart began to hammer against her ribs. Penn Station was just a blur of pain and misery. Her leg had throbbed so badly that she had to focus only on her crutches. She had stared at the ground the entire time, looking at no one. "No," she whispered, as a new wave of fear hit her. "I was just at my doctor's in Manhattan. I'm trying to get back home to Boston. What is going on?" "Keep your head down," Jackson ordered in a soft but firm tone. "Focus on the dog. Pet him. It will keep you calm." Chloe obeyed, sinking her trembling fingers into Havoc's thick fur. A deep growl rumbled in the dog's chest. At that very moment, Simon Miller stood up. He smoothed his suit, picked up a leather case, and stepped into the aisle. But he did not head towards the front of the train. Instead, he turned and walked to the back. He was moving directly toward Jackson and Chloe. Jackson noticed every little thing about the man. Simon's walk seemed forced. He tried to look relaxed, but his posture was stiff. He held his briefcase so hard that his knuckles were white. His other hand, however, was empty and swung just a little too close to his coat pocket. Then Simon stopped, right next to their seats. He looked down, casting a dark shadow over Chloe. She had no other choice but to look up at him. The man, Simon, appeared perfectly normal, almost handsome, but his eyes were completely empty. They held no human feeling at all. They were like camera lenses, simply taking in information. "Are those crutches giving you some trouble?" Simon asked. His voice was silky, but it had no real warmth. It sounded like a line he had practiced many times. Before Chloe could even respond, Havoc moved. He was completely silent. A bark is a warning, and Havoc was done with warnings. The huge German shepherd leaped with all his 90 pounds over Chloe's lap, his strong jaws snapping shut with a loud crack just 3 inches from Simon Miller's leg. Simon jumped back in alarm, falling into a seat on the other side of the aisle. His polite mask fell away, showing a look of pure, cold anger. "Good heavens!" Simon cried out, acting like an innocent person. "You have to get that animal under control. It nearly took a piece out of me." Jackson's voice was calm and level. He did not even try to get up. He just looked at Simon with the eyes of a man who understood violence. "He did not try to bite you," Jackson said, his voice cutting through the train's sounds. "If he had, your main artery would be painting the ceiling red. He was just telling you to move away." "That dog is a threat," Simon hissed, creeping forward as his hand drifted toward his jacket. "I am going to speak with the conductor about this." "Go on. Please, take one more step," Jackson invited, his voice becoming dangerously low. "Go ahead and reach inside that left pocket. I truly hope you do. Just give me one reason." Simon froze. For 3 long seconds, the two men locked eyes. Jackson had not moved at all, but a strong sense of danger flowed from him. Simon was a predator who thought he had found an easy target. He had chosen the girl with crutches, thinking she was a simple mark. He saw her injury and assumed she was weak. But he had made a terrible mistake. He did not know that the quiet man beside her was something else entirely. He had walked into the den of a far more dangerous animal. Simon's gaze flickered down to Jackson's waist, noticing the subtle outline of something under his coat. He then looked at Havoc, who was now displaying a full set of bright, sharp teeth. Simon slowly raised his hands as if giving up, a false, oily smile spreading on his face. "Hey, take it easy, my friend. I was just trying to be a gentleman." He spun around and walked quickly to the front of the car, disappearing through the sliding doors. Chloe was finding it hard to breathe, her chest heaving up and down. Who was that man? Why did he do that? "Just try to breathe, Chloe," Jackson said, finally turning his eyes from the doors. He reached down and stroked Havoc's head. "That is all for now, boy. Good dog." Havoc immediately became quiet but stayed pressed against Chloe, his body still tense and watchful. "I have no idea who he is," Jackson said quietly, his mind racing, but he was not going to the bathroom. And he certainly was not trying to be a friend. Before Chloe could say another word, the entire train car plunged into total darkness. The steady clatter of the wheels on the rails changed to a terrible, loud scream of metal scraping against metal. Someone had pulled the emergency brake. The massive Acela Express train shuddered violently, throwing bags from the overhead storage and launching screaming passengers from their seats. Jackson reacted with amazing speed. He unbuckled his seatbelt, lunged to the side, and shoved Chloe deep into her seat. He covered her head and neck with his own body. Under them, Havoc dropped to the floor, shielding Chloe's legs with his heavy frame. The train screeched to a final, brutal stop inside a pitch-black tunnel. The emergency backup lights blinked on, bathing the car in a strange, dim yellow light. The air was filled with dust and smoke. Outside the window, there was only the dark, damp brick of the tunnel wall. "Are you hurt?" Jackson whispered, his face now very near to hers. "No," she was able to say, her body shaking without control. Jackson slowly raised himself, his eyes scanning the chaos and panic that had taken over the car. The glass doors at the front of their car had been completely shattered by the sudden stop. Jackson's voice was low and serious. He told her, "Do not move from this seat." His hand slid beneath his jacket and wrapped around the grip of a pistol. "You stay here. Havoc, you guard her." The dog let out a quiet whine to show he understood and pushed himself more firmly against Chloe. She felt a wave of pure terror and grabbed Jackson's arm, asking where he was going. Jackson just looked at the broken doors. He spoke in a soft voice. "Trains do not just stop inside a tunnel. Somebody did this, and I would bet it was our friend in the blue suit." The air was thick with dust and the sharp, metallic smell of burnt brakes. The emergency lights cast a sickly yellow glow on the frightened faces of the other passengers. Some were crying, while others were choking on the dust. They began pulling out their phones, only to discover what Jackson already knew. They were deep under the East River in a tunnel. There was absolutely no signal. They were trapped in a long, sealed metal container. Jackson moved down the aisle with the calm purpose of an experienced hunter. His old training allowed him to function in the middle of chaos, to tune out the noise of panic and focus on the real threat. He drew his Sig Sauer P5 from its holster, holding it tight against his body and out of sight. He carefully stepped around a shattered laptop and moved by a businessman who was gasping for air on the floor. When he reached the broken doors of their car, he found a train conductor. His name tag read, Stanley Jenkins. The older man was slumped on a wall, pressing a hand to a bleeding cut on his forehead. "Hey," Jackson said softly, kneeling down and placing a hand on Stanley's shoulder. "What just happened? Who hit the brake?" Stanley blinked, struggling to see clearly through the blood. "A man in a blue suit knocked me down. He was with another man. A really big man in a leather jacket. They smashed the emergency box and pulled the lever. Right after, they jammed the doors to the cars in front of us." Jackson put the pieces together in a second. There were two of them. By blocking the forward exits, they were not trying to take over the whole train. They were cutting off the rear cars. They were turning this section into a sealed trap. "They kept asking me about cameras," Stanley coughed, flinching in pain. "They wanted to know if this part of the tunnel had any surveillance. I told them no, and that is when they struck me." Jackson's jaw grew tight. This was not a random act. This was a carefully planned assault, happening in a location where there would be no video evidence. He gave Stanley's shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "You just wait here. Do not try to be a hero." Then, Jackson slipped through the broken doorway into the dark area between the cars. The quiet hum of the tunnel's fans masked the sound of his steps. He peered through the dirty window of the next car. He saw them. Simon Miller had removed his expensive suit jacket. He was now wearing a black tactical shirt. He stood at the far end of the car, watching the door they had blocked. But it was the other man, the one Stanley described, that made the hair on Jackson's neck stand up. The man was as big as a brick house and wore a heavy leather jacket and combat gloves. His name was Roman Blackwood, a notorious specialist hired to handle tough problems with extreme and deadly force. This was clearly not a simple mugging. Roman moved through the car, his gaze fixed on each passenger's legs. Only their legs. Jackson's mind immediately flashed back to Chloe. He pictured her carbon fiber leg braces and her unique crutches. She was coming back from a medical visit in the city. In that instant, a chilling realization clicked into place. They were not here for Chloe. They were here for something she was carrying without even knowing it. The clinic must have hidden a priceless object inside her medical equipment. Simon and Roman were obviously here to retrieve it. Roman shoved a frightened teenager out of his way and headed for Chloe, thinking a girl on crutches would be an easy problem to solve. There was no more time left to think. Jackson disappeared into the dark space connecting the train cars. He melted into the shadows, holding his breath. A heavy door groaned open. Roman entered, his eyes slowly getting used to the low light, completely unaware of the danger that was waiting for him. The attack was fast and savage. Jackson did not use his weapon. A gunshot inside the tunnel would have warned Simon. Instead, he smashed his forearm into Roman's windpipe, pinning him against the steel wall. His right knee came up hard, striking a nerve that made Roman's entire leg go dead. Roman gasped for breath, his leg buckling beneath him. Even so, the seasoned fighter threw a hard elbow at Jackson's skull. Jackson swayed back, narrowly avoiding the blow. He seized Roman's arm and forced it backward into an impossible position. A terrible tearing noise echoed in the confined area. The big man fell, his face becoming a deep, dark purple. Jackson leaned over him, his voice like winter frost. The gear. What did the doctor conceal in her braces? Spitting blood, Roman choked out, "It is too late for you. The drive, a new prototype. It is sealed in titanium." Jackson twisted the man's injured shoulder, making him cry out in agony. "Who does Simon work for?" But Roman could not answer. A distinct click came from the far side of the train car. Jackson recognized that sound instantly. It was a 9mm pistol getting ready to shoot. He could see Simon aiming through the window. With no hesitation, Jackson pushed Roman's heavy body forward. He slammed into the door just as Simon pulled the trigger. The gunshot was deafening, and the glass shattered into 1,000 pieces. Roman's body armor absorbed the bullet, and he crashed to the ground. Jackson was already moving back, searching for shelter in Chloe's car. The conflict had only just begun. The world turned into a blur of frightening sound for Chloe. The loud blast sparked panic throughout the carriage. Passengers scrambled for safety under their seats, but Chloe was stuck in the middle of the aisle. Her rigid leg braces and aching back made it impossible for her to move fast or seek cover. She was exposed and helpless, but she had a protector. Havoc was pure strength and sharp senses. His training took over the moment the gun fired. The large shepherd held his position firmly. He shifted to shield Chloe's legs with his own body. A deep, menacing growl started in his chest, a feeling Chloe could sense. "Good boy," she murmured, gripping his thick fur with trembling hands. "Don't you leave me." At that moment, another person emerged in the chaotic aisle. It was not Jackson. It was someone she did not know. He had been seated several rows away, appearing like a normal passenger. His face was hidden by a gray sweatshirt and a mask. His name was Trevor, and Simon's team had sent him to handle any complications. The gunshot signaled that the original plan had failed. His mission now was to retrieve the item. Trevor strode confidently down the aisle, paying no attention to the terrified crowd. He was focused only on Chloe. From his pocket, he drew a thick steel pry bar with a pointed end. He intended to break open her titanium braces, grab the drive, and vanish. "My apologies, kid," Trevor muttered, closing the distance. "This will not be pleasant." He raised the heavy bar, ready to strike her knee, but the blow never landed. Havoc launched himself into the air. He was a blur of black and brown fur. The dog went right past the weapon and bit down hard on Trevor's right arm. A loud crack of breaking bone echoed through the car, followed by Trevor's pained shriek. The metal bar clattered to the floor, but Havoc's job was not done. Havoc knew precisely how to neutralize a threat. He leveraged his body to drag Trevor down into the narrow aisle. The large dog held the screaming man on the floor. His massive paws pressed on Trevor's chest as his jaws kept a solid grip on the shattered arm. He was not trying to tear him apart, only to restrain him. The dog's intelligent gaze met Trevor's, and a quiet growl was the only warning he gave. Chloe stared, stunned, her heart racing. Her gentle companion had transformed into a fierce guardian. A figure stood over her, and she realized it was Jackson. He understood the situation immediately. The tool on the ground, the man pinned by the dog, and Chloe, looking frightened but unharmed. "Havoc." "Release," Jackson ordered. The dog instantly complied. He backed away but remained close, keeping an eye on the injured man. Jackson ignored Trevor's groans. He pulled 2 plastic ties from his belt and fastened the man's uninjured arm to a seat post. Jackson focused completely on Chloe, crouching next to her. "Chloe, I need you to focus," he said gently. "Are you injured? Did he touch you at all?" "No," she murmured, as tears started to flow down her cheeks. "Havoc. He protected me." "Good boy," Jackson replied softly, scratching the dog's head for a moment. Havoc gave a single wag of his tail. Jackson's gaze then fell to her legs and the complex braces of steel and carbon fiber. "Chloe, I am going to need your help," he said, his eyes meeting hers. "Try to remember your last appointment at the Manhattan Clinic. Did they ever remove your braces and take them to another area? Were there any adjustments made?" Chloe was puzzled by the odd question. "Yes, Dr. Aries said they required a recalibration. He took them to his laboratory for close to an hour." Jackson swore under his breath. He carefully traced the thickest section of her left brace with his fingertips. He detected a tiny, almost hidden seam. The metal was not a single piece. It was a cover. "There is a hidden space here. Chloe, they used you," Jackson stated, his voice filled with controlled rage. "Your doctor belongs to a criminal network. He modified your braces to be a smuggling device. It likely contains classified data, stolen from the government or a major corporation. These men are after whatever is concealed in your brace." Chloe stared at her legs in disbelief and fear. The devices that allowed her to walk had been used for a criminal purpose. "Can you remove it?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Just give it to them." "That is not an option," Jackson replied. "They would eliminate us as witnesses. We are not surrendering. We will find a way through this." Just then, the damaged door at the car's front was ripped from its frame with a tremendous crash. Jackson got to his feet. He saw Simon Miller enter the car, gripping a 9mm handgun. The disguise of an ordinary traveler was gone. He now looked like a trapped beast, frantic to seize his target before law enforcement showed up. "Havoc," Jackson said quietly, his tone turning to steel. "Engage." The dog moved past Chloe into the center of the aisle, the hair on his back bristling. Jackson stood just behind him, aiming his own weapon at Simon. "It ends now, Miller. Turn and leave. Jackson's steady, clear voice cut through the silent car. Simon laughed, but it was a hollow, chilling sound. You are a long way from your base, soldier. You honestly believe you and that animal can prevent me from taking my property? Jackson's expression hardened. He is more than just a dog, and I am not a soldier. His finger remained firm on the trigger. I am a Navy SEAL. Tiny beads of sweat formed on Simon Miller's brow, glistening under the emergency lighting. He specialized in corporate espionage, not confronting an elite operative with a combat dog. The narrow train aisle had become a combat zone, and Jackson had the advantage. Who are you, her private security? Simon sneered, but his weapon hand trembled slightly. You do not know what is in that brace. It is classified military tech. The people I work for will tear this town apart to get it back. You are going to die for a disabled girl who means nothing to you. I do not have to know her, Jackson stated. His calm voice was more menacing than any yell. I only have to know you. Simon glanced around frantically for an escape. He understood that he could not win a gunfight. Jackson was a perfect shot. Jackson aimed his weapon directly at Simon's center mass. If Simon flinched, Jackson could put 2 rounds in his chest before he could fire. Desperate people make terrible decisions. Simon leaped to his right. He seized a terrified woman cowering in her seat, a nurse by the name of Sophia Higgins. Simon violently dragged Sophia to her feet and pressed his 9mm against her temple, using her as a shield. Sophia shrieked in terror, her hands flying to her face. Put the gun down, Simon shouted, his calm demeanor shattered by raw panic. Drop your weapon immediately, or I will kill her. Fear spread among the other travelers. Chloe covered her mouth with her hand, sobbing for the innocent woman. Jackson's expression was a blank mask. His weapon stayed up. When there is a hostage, lowering your gun means losing all leverage. He glanced at the train car ceiling, noting the lights and reflections. Then, Jackson did something completely unexpected. He removed his left hand from his pistol and reached into a large pants pocket. I said, drop it! Simon yelled again, jamming the gun harder against Sophia's head. You can have what you want, Jackson said, his voice steady. With a flick of his wrist, a small, dark cylinder rolled down the aisle. It moved without a sound across the carpet and stopped just a few feet from Simon. Simon stared at it, his face pale with alarm, assuming it was an explosive. It was not an explosive. It was a high-powered tactical flashlight. As soon as it settled, Jackson activated a remote in his pocket. A dazzling 3,000 lumen strobe beam erupted, aimed directly at Simon. The flash in the dim car was disorienting, and Simon staggered back, blinded. Simon shut his eyes tight and twisted away from the brilliant light. His disorientation lasted for only about 1.5 seconds. For an ex-Navy SEAL and his canine partner, it was more than enough time. Jackson had no clear shot with Sophia in the way. He made a low, sharp click with his tongue. Havoc avoided the main aisle, staying out of the direct line of fire. The 90-pound German Shepherd cleared the seats as if they were hurdles. He moved like a phantom through the strobing lights, approaching the gunman from an angle. Before Simon's vision returned, Havoc launched himself from a seatback. A blur of fur and fury crashed into Simon's body. Havoc expertly bypassed the hostage, his powerful jaws clamping down on the man's gun arm. The sheer force of the impact threw Simon clear of Sophia. A raw, agonized scream tore from Simon's throat as his arm bones shattered. His 9mm pistol hit the floor with a sharp clatter. Havoc pinned Simon flat, his weight holding him fast. A deep, threatening growl vibrated inches from Simon's face. Sophia collapsed into the aisle, sobbing hysterically. Jackson closed the distance between them in 3 rapid steps. A swift kick sent Simon's pistol skittering under a seat. He then hauled the man up by the front of his shirt. A hard knee strike to the chest drove all the air from Simon's lungs. Jackson ordered, "Havoc, off." The dog immediately released the ruined limb and backed away, his sharp eyes locked on the man's throat. Jackson produced another set of heavy-duty zip ties and secured Simon's hands. The fight was over. The train car was secure. A heavy silence descended on the passengers, broken by soft sobs and the dog's calm panting. Jackson finally straightened up, his own heart beating a little faster. He looked down at Simon, who was wheezing on the floor, his face white with terror. "Aegis defense systems should screen their people better," Jackson said, his voice cold. He turned and strode back down the aisle as the emergency lights steadied. He knelt beside Chloe once more. She was shaking from head to toe, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and amazement. "It's over," Jackson said softly, resting a hand on her shoulder. "You're safe now, Chloe. Nobody is going to hurt you." The adrenaline drained out of Chloe, leaving a deep weariness in its place, along with the awful feeling of being utterly helpless. She glanced at the brace that supported her left leg. For so many years, she depended on that device of titanium and carbon fiber just to walk. Dr. Eris, a man she had trusted for 5 years, had secretly modified it. He had used her as a courier for stolen government data. "He was always so kind to me," Chloe whispered, her voice thick with the sting of betrayal. "Dr. Eris. He said he was reinforcing the joints to ease my pain. He even got me coffee while he worked on it." Jackson's jaw tightened. He had seen the worst of humanity in combat. But a doctor exploiting a disabled patient was a special kind of evil. "Men who trade in secrets stop seeing people," Jackson explained gently. "They only see assets and delivery systems." He pulled a multi-tool from a pouch on his tactical vest. "I need to get that drive out of your brace before the police arrive. If the Federal Bureau of Investigation finds it, you'll be detained for weeks. They'll try to link you to this operation. We have to separate this evidence from you." Chloe nodded, her eyes pleading. "Please, just take it out." Jackson knelt down. Havoc padded over and laid his heavy head on Chloe's good knee. The warm pressure was a small comfort. Jackson examined the thick titanium rod of her brace. He used a small light from his tool to find a nearly invisible seam. The work was incredible. The rod looked like a single, solid piece of metal, but a tiny screw was concealed beneath a rubber seal. With precise, practiced movements, Jackson lifted the rubber and inserted the tiny screwdriver. He gave it exactly 3 turns. A 3-inch section of the rod clicked open. A sleek black memory stick rested inside, nestled in protective foam. It was unbranded, marked only with a laser-etched serial number. It also had a small, faint red insignia that Jackson recognized instantly. It was a covert logo for the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. Jackson used his knife's point to carefully pry the drive loose. He held the tiny device in his hand, the very thing that had nearly cost Chloe her life. "This is protected by military-grade encryption," Jackson murmured. He wrapped the drive in a small piece of cloth and placed it in a secure vest pocket. "I'll hand this directly to the federal agents. I will explain that you were an unwitting victim. Your name will be kept out of any official suspect reports. I give you my word." "Thank you," Chloe breathed, a wave of relief washing over her. "I don't know how to possibly thank you, or your incredible dog." "He's a very good boy," Jackson said, a genuine smile touching his lips. "He knew you were someone who deserved to be saved." At that moment, the shriek of power saws cutting metal echoed from the front of the train. Every passenger tensed. Red and blue lights began to pulse against the grimy tunnel walls. "That would be the New York Police Department," Jackson announced for all to hear. "Listen to me, everyone. The police are entering. Keep your hands visible. Do not make any sudden moves. We have 3 criminals restrained on the floor. Let the professionals take it from here." Then, a brilliant spotlight flooded the front of the car, blinding everyone. Officers in blue tactical gear rushed in, their rifles ready. "New York Police! Hands up! Don't move, the team leader shouted, his light sweeping through the darkness. Jackson remained perfectly still. He understood how tense these situations could become. He rose slowly, raising his empty hands to shoulder level. He positioned himself in front of Havoc, shielding the dog from the agitated officers. "I'm friendly," Jackson called out, his voice strong and clear. "I'm retired Navy Special Forces. My weapon is holstered. There is one hostile wounded, and 2 more are secured in the aisle. The situation is under control." The lead officer advanced cautiously. He kept his rifle trained on Jackson as his team moved to secure Simon, Trevor, and Roman. "Sir, I need you to keep your hands where I can see them," the officer instructed. His eyes flickered to the large German shepherd sitting calmly at Jackson's feet. "And get control of your dog. He's a trained military police canine. He won't move without my command," Jackson answered evenly. The suspects activated the emergency brake. They were attempting to steal classified government assets. As police swarmed the car, a paramedic made his way to Chloe. "Ma'am, are you injured?" the paramedic asked, shining a small light into her eyes. "I'm okay," Chloe replied, her voice shaky but resolved. "My back. I can't stand for very long." "We'll get a backboard for you," the medic promised, speaking into his radio for support. As they prepared to move her, Chloe looked toward Jackson. He was surrounded by officers, calmly presenting his identification. He passed the tiny drive to a federal agent who had just boarded. Amid the chaos, and knowing he faced hours of debriefing, Jackson turned his head. His sharp gray eyes met hers across the crowded car. He gave her a single, reassuring nod. Beside him, Havoc sat perfectly still and alert. The handsome German shepherd exhaled slowly, and his amber eyes met Chloe's one last time. Then Jackson gave a quiet word, and both he and the dog were gone, swallowed by the flashing lights. Hours later, Chloe was in an interview room, listening to the steady hum of the Federal Bureau of Investigation office's fluorescent lights. She clutched a coarse gray blanket around her shoulders. A cold cup of coffee sat on the table, untouched. It had been 9 hours since the rescue. 9 hours of medics, bright lights, endless questions, and now this final meeting with 2 weary federal agents. Special Agent Thomas Sterling, his deep exhaustion plain on his face, dropped a thick file on the table. "Miss Rollins, you must grasp the severity of this," he said, leaning in. "The device in your brace is a quantum targeting system. It was developed by Aegis Defense Systems for a Black Ops mission. The men on that train were not petty criminals. They were professional mercenaries. They would not be chasing a woman who didn't know what she was carrying." "I have told you everything I know," Chloe repeated, her voice frail but edged with a newfound resolve. "I visited my doctor, George Eris, for a routine brace adjustment. He took it to his workshop, and I waited while I drank some tea. I knew nothing about any of this." Agent Sterling rubbed his temples. "Dr. Eris is a leading surgeon with a Park Avenue practice. To suggest he's a traitor based on the word of a frightened woman is an extraordinary accusation." Before Chloe could reply, the heavy door opened. Jackson Reynolds entered the room. He had changed out of his green tactical jacket and was wearing a simple black shirt that revealed the toned muscles and faded scars on his arms. Havoc was not with him, likely waiting in a specialized K9 vehicle. A much older man in a charcoal suit followed Jackson inside. His credentials showed an exceptionally high security clearance. "The woman is telling the truth, Sterling," the man said flatly. "I'm ordering you to conclude this interview." Sterling immediately snapped to attention. "Director, we were simply confirming the events." "Those events have been confirmed," Jackson interjected, his cool gray eyes fixed on the agent. "I'm the one who removed the drive from a hidden compartment in her titanium brace, a compartment requiring special tools we later found in Dr. Eris's workshop." Jackson made it clear. Miss Rollins is a victim here, not a criminal. Any charges or media leaks will bring the Department of Defense to your door. His gaze found Chloe, and his harsh expression eased. "Are you all right?" "I want to go home," Chloe whispered, clutching the blanket. "I really just want to be back in Boston." "You will be," Jackson assured her gently. She was guided to a quiet room with a small bed to rest. Just then, Jackson's influential allies started to set things right. The time was 4:30 in the morning. Far away, Dr. George Aries was frantically packing a duffel bag with securities and encrypted drives. His luxurious apartment overlooking Central Park was completely dark. A single light glowed from an office shredder in a corner. Sweat covered Aries, and his hands were shaking. A message had arrived 30 minutes earlier on a disposable phone. It read, "Train mission failed. The target is alive. Delete everything. Leave now." He pulled the zipper on the bag, his mind racing with sheer terror. He was once so confident in his scheme. He had discovered long ago that his disabled patients made ideal, unsuspecting couriers. Security at airports and train stations seldom inspected medical equipment, fearing accusations of discrimination. For a huge payment from a front company, Aries was to hide the Aegis drive in Chloe's brace. The plan was for a simple handover in Boston. Aries lifted the heavy bag to his shoulder and walked to his office door. Right as he reached for the handle, the solid oak door exploded inward in a shower of splintered wood. An agent from the Federal Bureau of Investigation had used a steel ram to tear the door from its frame. 3 red laser dots appeared on his chest before he could even scream. Agents in tactical armor stormed the office, their boots crushing the shredded papers. "Federal Bureau of Investigation! Show us your hands! Drop the bag!" an agent shouted. Aries let the bag fall as if it were burning and collapsed to his knees. He laced his fingers behind his head and began to sob. The respected surgeon, once a master of people's fates, was now a pathetic mess on his expensive carpet. From the shadowy hall, Agent Sterling stepped in to assess the situation. He stared down at the quivering doctor. "Dr. George Aries," Sterling said with disgust, "you are under arrest for treason, spying, and endangering a civilian's life. You can remain silent, and I suggest you do." For the next 3 days, the whole mission was kept secret. When the story was finally released, it was described as a complex financial crime. The drive, the mercenaries, and the former soldier with his dog were buried in classified files as government secrets, and the name Chloe Rollins was never mentioned. Half a year had passed since the terrifying incident in the tunnel. New York's humid summer heat was replaced by the crisp, refreshing air of autumn in Boston. In the Boston Public Garden, the trees displayed vibrant reds and oranges that matched Chloe's coat. The familiar sound of her crutches clicking on the pavement remained, but it was different. Her steps were faster now, carrying a new sense of confidence. After Dr. Aries was caught, the government quietly provided her with funds for victims. She took the money to top engineers at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. They created an entirely different kind of brace for her. The new ones were made from a lightweight 3D printed blend of carbon and Kevlar, not heavy titanium. These supports were so much lighter, which relieved her constant back pain. Most importantly, they belonged only to her. Chloe paused her stroll by the Swan Boat Pond, her breath a small cloud in the air. Her body felt stronger, but her emotional scars were still there. She would often scan crowds for men in dark suits, searching for cold eyes and hidden guns. It was hard to come to terms with being exploited for her disability. "You know, that feeling goes away with time." The soft voice from her right blended so well with the park's peaceful sounds that she never heard him approach. When Chloe turned, she caught her breath. Jackson Reynolds stood by a bench. He wore a heavy, dark coat with the collar up, and his hands were deep in his pockets. The slight scar on his jaw could be seen in the chilly air. He looked just as he had on the train, composed, assured, and completely unshakable. But it was not Jackson's face that made her eyes well up. Sitting beside him, ignoring the surroundings, was 90 pounds of pure muscle and wise, amber eyes. "Havoc," Chloe whispered, her face lighting up with a broad smile. Jackson gave the dog a small nod. "All right, pal, go on." Havoc did not leap forward but moved with a quiet elegance. The huge German Shepherd approached Chloe, smelled her new braces, and did exactly what he had done 6 months before. He leaned his warm, strong frame against her leg, sighed deeply, and rested his large head on her knee. One of Chloe's crutches fell to the path with a gentle noise as she buried her hands in the thick fur of Havoc's neck. She shut her eyes while tears flowed, remembering his reassuring weight in her darkest hour. "I truly thought I would never see you two again," Chloe admitted, her voice trembling. She looked at Jackson as he picked up her crutch. "Sterling told me you vanished, that you were gone." "I was gone," Jackson answered softly, handing the crutch to her. "I needed to handle Simon Miller's superiors, to shut down their fake company and ensure no one came looking for their lost messenger." Chloe flinched at that term, but Jackson held her gaze. "You are not a messenger, Chloe. You never were," he said firmly. "Simon and Aries saw your condition as a weakness to exploit. Their mistake was not seeing the whole person. They did not see who I saw." "What was it that you saw?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. "I saw someone who endures constant pain, yet she rode a crowded train each day. I saw someone who stared at a gun just 3 feet away and showed no fear. I saw a true survivor." A rare, genuine smile touched his serious face. Havoc saw it too. "A dog like him protects his pack, not the weak. He knew you were strong before I did." Havoc grunted softly and nudged Chloe's hand with his nose. "Dr. Aries admitted to everything," Chloe told him, a great burden lifting from her. "He got 25 years, with no possibility of parole." "Good," Jackson said, nodding with satisfaction. "Looks like you have an upgrade," he observed, nodding toward her legs. "Engineers at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology designed them," Chloe replied with a proud smile. "They are lighter, stronger, and have no hidden compartments this time." "You are the only secret that matters," he corrected her gently. "Stay strong, Chloe. Never let them make you fear the world. The world should fear you." Jackson whistled once, sharp and clear. Havoc instantly moved from Chloe to sit beside Jackson, alert and waiting. "Take care, Chloe," Jackson said, turning to leave. "Jackson, wait," Chloe called after him. He paused and looked back at her. "Will we meet again?" she asked. Jackson glanced from Chloe to the incredible dog beside him. "You have our coordinates," he said. "If you are ever on a train and need a friend, well, at least I finally know your name now." With a simple, brief wave, Jackson Reynolds and his magnificent dog were gone. They disappeared into the vibrant Boston park, leaving Chloe feeling renewed, optimistic, and permanently changed. The terrible experience on the train had reshaped Chloe's life, turning her from a victim into a warrior. She had learned that true evil can be difficult to spot. It often hides behind expensive suits and a friendly smile. She also realized that real heroes appear in unexpected ways. The quiet veteran with his scars and his loyal dog proved that great power and profound kindness can exist together. Jackson and Havoc gave Chloe more than just protection. They shattered the illusion of her own weakness. From that day on, the burden of her past no longer held her down. She moved forward with a quiet confidence in her own inner strength, model